I think Geoff Keighley is a bad person. Now, let me clarify, I wrote most of this script after the terrible Game Awards this year, and I think he has addressed some of my issues at the Summer Game Fest this year, but most of my points still stand. The small little mentions he gave to industry issues at the beginning of the show were good, but not great enough. Credit where credit is due, though, he did say some genuinely good stuff about supporting indie devs, and finally acknowledged the layoffs and made a call to treat devs better. That said, why did it take so long? I'll get into all of it, but I just wanted to give that little foreword before I start. Now, gamers love commercials. I mean, we eat that shit up. We crave advertisements. I know it's like 6 months late now, but after this year's miserable Game Awards, the official death of E3, and just the state of the industry in general, I'm thinking about how we are just suckers through and through. We have all of these different, elaborate ways in which publishers market to us. By dressing it up as a fun event, they get us drooling to watch a long string of commercials. Before E3 died, it was the most exciting time of the year. But E3 lost its charm well before it died because there simply isn't much need for that kind of event anymore. News is not difficult to distribute to massive audiences, and most major publishers have their own Nintendo Direct style presentations at this point. Sony still can't figure out how to make them good, though. Yet, Geoff Keighley positioned himself as the E3 usurper, and now that he has the throne, what does he do with it? Tell people that it's a light year for the industry and to lower your expectations. Riveting stuff. A Summer Game Fest has never really been exciting. Xbox, Sony, and Nintendo all do their own shows, and Xbox's was actually really good this year. But most of what's left for Geoff is AAA slop, though there were some really excellent looking indies this year. But Summer Game Fest is no E3 replacement. That model is good and dead, and it's only a matter of time before companies stop coalescing all of their announcements to the same week of June. But the Game Awards is a different story. The Game Awards, since Geoff Keighley took over, was poised as a second E3. At the time, E3 was bigger than Christmas for gamers, and TGA was about to be second Christmas. And for a while, it kind of was that. The Game Awards was highlighting individuals in the industry, it felt full of soul, and there were new, exciting games being shown off. But, my dear viewers, look at your calendar. There is no second Christmas. These two events can't coexist, and that is now apparent with E3 having been officially ended. The bottom line is that E3 is no longer useful to the industry, and while Geoff Keighley has positioned himself as that usurper, the Game Awards is headed to share the same grave because it is losing what made it unique in the first place. Year after year, the Game Awards become increasingly commercial and more unexciting to watch. This year, more than ever, I heard so many people complaining on Twitter about the miserable pacing, blatant disrespect to developers, and the abundance of samey sci-fi shooter slop. The Game Awards is no longer about celebrating the industry, and it is no longer about news. Yes, there are a lot of new games announced, but it is overwhelmed with advertisements for games we know about, games that are already out, movies that nobody cares about, random celebrities that haven't played a video game since the 90s, and other products and services that have nothing to do with the event.
And sweaty and smelly Iron Paradise, powered by, of course, Zoa Energy, the #1 fastest growing energy drink in the game.
The whole thing just feels like a big American entertainment industry ad. Now, ads aren't bad in and of themselves. They pay the bills and they sustain the high production value of the event. But when the event of the Game Awards is the advertisements and not, the awards, now we've got a problem. But gamers love ads, trailers are ads, and more than any other medium, gamers love and arguably need trailers to communicate the experience of playing a game through a medium that is inherently different. Movie trailers don't have this issue. You're working within the same medium as the product you're selling, video. But for games, demos are the only way to achieve that, but not every game demos well because they can be so long and variable. A few hours of a demo might not be adequate to communicate the feedback loop a game has. So we rely on trailers. But trailers have to communicate atmosphere and gameplay. what it feels like to play, and what it actually looks like. Games are usually more fun to play than they look like they are in gameplay. So while trailers are absolutely advertisement, they are also the industry's primary form of news communication. Release dates, new features, etc. are almost always announced in new trailers. The marketing run of a game usually consists of several trailers that drop new bits of news leading up to release. Film trailers, though, are different. They're more about communicating the vibe rather than revealing details, because there's only so much you can show before you start to ruin it. So a lot of the nitty-gritty of film stuff is released in interviews and press releases. Going back to E3, even in its final years, it was still about news. E3 was the place to premiere new games, drop dramatic reveals, or anything else that you wanted to announce to the most people possible. And the showcases were separated enough that it was easy to categorize news and at very least keep up with the headlines over the course of that week. The Game Awards and Summer Game Fest are single multi-hour events that do have news, but also have way more straight-up advertisements than any other similar event or direct style presentation, which is zero. So problem one is that everything is thrown into the blender together, and if you didn't watch the event, you'll only see the big announcements, and if you did watch it, you're not going to remember most of what you see in that 3 to 4 hour block of samey garbage. TGA prides itself on world premieres, but they use that term pretty loosely. While there is a good amount of actual news, and a lot of projects that do look really cool, between the straight-up commercial breaks and the amount of meaningless trailers featured, the whole experience of the event is kind of
smelly.
I also want to raise a personal complaint with the sameness of so many of these filler trailers. Year after year, I see what feels like the same sci-fi shooter game dozens of times.
Pew, pew, pew.
I don't want to dog on the talent making these games, because surely somewhere in there somebody is passionate about these projects. But it is impossible to separate these games from the ever-rushing landslide that is trend chasing. Trends move much faster than games are developed, and so for the last several years we have seen the fruits of projects started when we were chasing a sci-fi looter trend, and most people aren't interested in that anymore. While some of these games might have interesting ideas, they aren't really exciting. Clever spin or not, they're chasing a fad that has little appeal today. But years of work have gone into these games, and these studios can't afford to shelve the projects. That is why so many studios, especially in 2023, went bankrupt and closed immediately after shipping a game, regardless of sales. At the end of the day, I wish all artists and game makers success. It's a tough industry, and I certainly don't think that TGA should only accept trailers that appeal to me specifically, but it is pretty apparent that there's a problem here. 3.5 hours is a very long time to watch anything, but for this?
Okay, whether you call it a cap or a hat or a capat, I'm good with all of it because it's just part of Toad's awesomeness.
It's ridiculous, especially when the awards only contribute to a fraction of the runtime. In 2021, the show was around 17% awards. Now, that number itself is honestly not that bad. The awards are cool and fun and supposedly the reason for the event, but I don't think they're actually super entertaining in and of themselves, and I don't think that's why most people are watching. I don't watch award shows for other industries like the Tonys or Oscars or Grammys or anything, but I'm going to assume that a lot of what is happening during those shows is performance and not just awards. But when you convert this into minutes, it's a little sobering. In 2021, that meant it was roughly 38 minutes of a 3.5 hour event. And, gotta be honest, I don't feel like watching this year's again to do the math, but it was even less awards and more trailers this year. And when we actually look at the awards, we see that this year winners were given 30 seconds to accept their reward and go home, making it blatantly obvious that the awards are simply an obligation, and that this is no longer an event about celebrating industry talent, it's an excuse to run ads. I imagine most of my viewers will agree that this sucks, but it works. at least for a short-term quick buck, get that paycheck, lay off some employees, start the next project, rinse and repeat. But how does it work if we're all mad about it? Think about your average citizen in your country, and remember that 50% of the population is dumber than that. Now apply this to our industry. First off, all of the conversation we partake in probably exists above the average in terms of consumer investment. And I want to be careful here. I don't mean to imply that if you're not invested, that you're dumb. But let's be generous and say that the average gamer watches the Game Awards and the average gamer keeps up with news and talks on Twitter and blah, 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 blah. That means 50% of gamers don't engage with the medium as deeply as we do. Just by watching this video, you are more invested than the average Joe. So 50%, again, generous, of the consumer base probably doesn't know much about the layoffs or poor working conditions. 50% of buyers don't spend nearly as much time learning about the games they buy as we do. They just grab the next FIFA and move on. 50% of gamers don't have the time, energy, or desire to think super critically about the games they play and who's making them. And I don't say that to condescend. I don't think everybody should be engaging with a hobby at this hyper-obsessive level that I do. But that means half of this community is fully susceptible to corporate waste because they don't know better. So yes, it sells. These slimy tactics work because they take advantage of the less engaged, the youth, or anyone who is not terminally online and doesn't keep up with all of the industry's problems. In other words, normal people. And this is true for basically all of entertainment, and actually just any industry under the current world order. Most people don't have the time or energy to know everything about what they're purchasing. That's why putting organic and vegan labels on things that are always organic and or vegan by default still raises sales. The average consumer is mostly uninformed. I certainly don't know anything about the food I buy when I go grocery shopping. I just grab what looks good. And many people are interacting with gaming the same way. So the whole big bad system of capitalism is to blame for the mess that is the Game Awards, but there is, of course, another culprit, Geoff Keighley. I think Geoff Keighley is a bad person. Until Summer Game Fest this year, he had made no comment about the rampant layoffs affecting thousands of developers, the same developers he claims his show is supposed to support. He talks big game about diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, yet the Innovation and Accessibility Award was relegated to the pre-show this year. I think one of the most egregious sins at this year's show was at the acceptance of the Game of the Year award, as Sven Vinke from Larian was shooed off stage while trying to honor the developers who literally died during production of this game.
You were the best, and without you, we couldn't have done it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
If the winner of the premier award, the whole reason the show exists, can't have a moment to honor people who effectively gave their lives to this game, what is the point of having a show at all? Beyond that, Neil Newman was interrupted while speaking out about how the queer community found solace in his role as Asterion.
To my agents, I will thank you later. I'm sorry, I'm going to wrap it up apparently. One thing I will say, please, if that's okay, the community has reached out to so many of us at Larian and said they were seen and they were represented by this game when they lost hope, they felt isolated, they felt alone, and this game brought them together and gave them something to push through to help them all. And to you, I want to say thank you so much for seeing us. Appreciate it. You're not alone in this. None of us are. Thank you.
And to top it all off, Hideo Kojima was given over 8 minutes to talk about OD, and 8 minutes that was impressively uninformative about the project. Now, I love Kojima, I think he's an auteur, and I love his work, but why was this given 16 times more stage time than any developer winning an award? OD seems like a cool project, but 8 minutes gave us next to no information about this game. And it's not the way it was a decade ago when Konami let go of Kojima. He doesn't need the platform. He has several high-profile projects in the works at the moment, and Geoff Keighley simply cares about being able to attach his name to Kojima's work more than actually supporting the rest of the industry. He's a clout chaser and a narcissist. At this point in the writing process, I considered throwing away that original idea and just ranting about how distasteful I think Geoff is, and how he's the poster boy for what is wrong with capitalism and whatnot. But let me rein it back in. If you recall, I claimed at the beginning that TGA is headed for the same grave as E3. Yes, year after year, the streaming numbers for TGA go up, and this year continued to break records. But again, more than ever, I saw so many people complaining online. I've been very tired of this show for years, and my problems with it have only gotten worse year after year. But I think we finally passed the tipping point where the majority of people are unhappy about it. If I'm seeing the average person complain about it, that means it's gotten pretty bad. More than ever, it felt soulless. Big publishers are investing more into the show while the big three are pulling out. Geoff is still laying into Chris Judge about his speech, and this year they completely overcorrected about it.
So I know I don't have much time. But I'll give it a shot.
We have firmly moved past the point where TGA is an event that bolsters artists to an event that is grossly commercialized. While the ads used to pay for the awards are now an excuse to air ads. So where does this leave us? Screwed? Maybe, maybe not. Do we just need to lay down and let the corpse shit on us, wipe it off our face with a smile and say thank you? No. I'm not going to go into a whole, here's how I would do it, because there's just no use for that. It's outside of my knowledge and skill set to propose an effective solution, but I can tell you that things suck right now and they need to change, and it's surely somebody's job to figure out how. As members of this community, the most important thing is that we are not silent. Geoff needs to be held accountable for his hypocrisy, disrespect for industry workers, and silence on matters where he could be using his platform to make meaningful change, both in and without the industry. Prior to this year's event, an open letter signed by nearly 3,000 industry members was sent to the TGA asking for the organization to make a statement about the long-running Israeli occupation, oppression, and genocide of the Palestinian people. No acknowledgement was given. And while he did finally talk about the layoffs this year at the beginning of SGA, these comments were a drop in the bucket compared to the power his platform holds, and he could be using it to help the industry stay sustainable and be healthy. So remember that Geoff Keighley is not your buddy. Maybe he was a few years ago, but not anymore, no matter how much he plays the friendly act. He is a corporate pocket boy and loves to play favorites with industry members, giving Hideo Kojima the spotlight year in and year out, whether or not he has something to actually say. And again, no hate to Kojima. I respect him immensely as an artist, but OD didn't need more time at TGA than any award got. Keighley just wants to attach his name. And it's tough, because Keighley started TGA with a clash against the industry and giving Kojima a platform. I think Keighley views himself as a savior or something, and now the success is going to his head and he's turning into some sort of conqueror. And now that he's usurped E3's luxurious throne, who's to stop him now? I wrote most of this in the last week of February 2024, where another massive series of layoffs have impacted many teams at Sony, EA, and others. On February 27th, Keighley tweeted a product placement for an AI-powered scent device for video games. Everything this man does is in bad taste. So again, I urge you all, do not be silent. Keep calling for Geoff to condemn the state of the industry, to push against the layoffs, because the industry is falling apart. AAA gaming is not sustainable, and if nobody can keep a job because studios can't hold on to people between projects, the AAA development scene will kill itself. Geoff Keighley is kind of like the guy of the industry right now. I don't think there's any single person who holds as much social power as he does. And I don't think people credit the awards for how much they influence the industry. On occasion, Geoff uses his platform to achieve good things. I do think accessibility has advanced significantly in the last few years because of it, and a lot of indie devs have gotten recognition on a scale that they could have never imagined. It Takes Two would have never had the audience it did without TGA. But despite a couple of good turns, the event at large shies away from being a force for change in the industry, a potential that it used to have. I've kind of lost the plot on my original thesis, which was more about how the state of advertisements in our industry is indicative of a self-destructive capitalist world in which the need to make more money cannibalizes the thing making money in the first place and completely eats away at the artistic drive to create meaningful art, and the Game Awards is such a painful example of that. I think it's pretty telling that Nintendo hardly has any presence at all, and Sony and Microsoft save most of their big hitters for separate showcases. The vast majority of this event is shameless products that drown out the people who are putting their livelihoods on the line to make art in this industry. Denying award-winning talent stage time while giving unconditional attention to established Hollywood celebrities feels like a slap in the face to anyone coming to the awards to celebrate the developers. Keighley refuses to openly talk about industry issues, but has no issue promoting bullshit products on his Twitter. And I'm disappointed. It seemed like he was different when he was sticking it to Konami, but it's clear he has other priorities now. And the Game Awards is doomed because of it, either because people get too fed up to watch it, developers stop showing up to be disrespected, or the AAA industry implodes on itself because the unsustainable business practices are perpetuated by behaviors that the show awards. So this has all been a bit of a ramble, less put together than some of my recent work, but I'm mad, and I needed to say it how it is. Geoff Keighley is a traitor and he needs to do better. Without our developers, we don't have an industry. We don't have a hobby, an escape, or a passion. We don't have any of the countless things that video games represent to all of us. So it's time to demand Geoff Keighley give them the respect his show promised them. If there is anyone who can push the industry in the right direction, I've got to believe it could be him.